Hey, my name is Rich, and I want to welcome you to a crisp evening on the Southern Oregon coast. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch the second installment of my YouTube video blog. The title of today's episode is It Costs Money to Run a Country, Part 2, or Are Americans the Highest Tax People in the World? During the campaign, the last presidential campaign, now President Manchild said something funny. He said, "We're the highest taxed nation in the world." Of course, that statement is false. Let's go ahead and break it down. Where does the United States rank in the world when it comes to personal income taxes? Well, to answer that question, let's start with what is the OECD? It's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. There are 34 member countries. It was established in 1960 by many of the world's most advanced economies as well as some emerging ones. These member countries are firmly committed to furthering democracy and capitalism. These member countries have good human rights records and have high human development indexes, which means they have higher life expectancy as well as higher incomes and higher levels of education. Of these 34 member countries, guess where the United States ranks? As you can see from the chart, we are fourth from the bottom, meaning there are 30 countries with personal income tax rates higher than the United States. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, it proves that we're not the highest taxed nation in the world. But Republicans will say, yeah, but Trump wasn't talking about personal income taxes, he was talking about corporate taxes. So, corporate taxes in America, let's talk about them. Out of the 34 OECD countries, the United States, in fact, ranks number one in the world in corporate taxes at a whopping 39%. So you might be saying, whoa, wait a minute. Do you mean Trump was actually right about something? No. That 39% is the statutory rate. That's the actual rate on paper minus exemptions and deductions. But here's the kicker. U.S. companies are never taxed at the statutory rate. They pay the effective tax rate. That's the rate with all that other stuff included, which brings the rate down. Okay. There's an independent economist by the name of Martin A. Sullivan. He puts the effective corporate tax rate in the United States at 22.9%. But 22.9% still makes us the fourth highest taxed nation amongst the developed countries. There's a nonprofit organization by the name of the Tax Foundation. Now, they were created in 1937 to help educate people about tax policy in the United States. What the Tax Foundation did is they looked at the corporate taxes among the G20 nations. Now, the G20 nations are the 20 most powerful economies on Earth. Now, the G20 economies make up 85% of the gross world product and 80% of all world trade. The Tax Foundation puts the U.S. effective tax rate at 18.6%, which still is fourth amongst the G20 nations. This admittedly doesn't make my argument very strong until you realize if you take our corporate taxes as a percentage of GDP, the United States actually is in the lower third of all the OECD countries. This is a terrible segue, but I just got to share this with you. In 2015, during the campaign season, Donald Trump said something absolutely hilarious. He said, his quote, "Last quarter was just announced. Our gross domestic product, a sign of strength, right? But not for us. It was below zero. Who ever heard of this? It's never below zero." Yeah, all right, I do a terrible Trump impression. But oh, President Manchild, you make me laugh. Here's the actual truth. The quarterly change in our gross domestic product has been below zero 42 times since 1946. Now, as far as our GDP in terms of dollars, well, it can't be zero. If only one person in the whole United States in all of last year only bought one pack of gum, our GDP wouldn't be zero. It's always fun when a business tycoon, a mogul, has no idea what gross domestic product means. So here's the actual truth about GDP. from 2015. Growth in GDP for all of 2015 was 2.4% from 2014. Total GDP in dollars was 18 trillion. It's awesome to know we elected a moron to the highest office in the land. Anyway, where was I? Corporate taxes. After all of this effective tax rate crap, here's the hidden truth. There are many Fortune 500 companies that have been paying no federal income tax at all. There were 100 companies that paid absolutely no taxes for at least 1 year from 2008 to 2015. 18 of those companies paid less than zero, which means they got a refund. Yeah, after millions, and in some cases billions, of profits, they got a tax refund. Well, what does this tell you? Well, it tells me that the federal government doesn't take in crap for corporate taxes. But this is by design, I'm sure. Fewer tax receipts coming into our federal government bolsters the argument that entitlement spending needs to either be sharply decreased or eliminated altogether, so that, of course, there's plenty of money left over to give to our already overfunded military-industrial complex, to defend our country. Ridiculous. Oh, by the way, this year, thanks to President Manchild needlessly increasing our defense budget, our military spending this year will be $596 billion. The next 7 largest countries combined will spend $567 billion. The rest of the world combined will spend $514 billion. It's fucking insane. As long as President Manchild is in office, our military spending will continue to increase. In order to make this kind of spending possible, here's what's going to happen. In order to make America great again, over the next 10 years, Medicaid, the federal health care program for the poor, will be cut by $800 billion. Nutritional assistance like WIC and SNAP will be cut by $192 billion. Welfare programs will be cut by $272 billion. Of course, you're going to say, yeah, great, we pay too much welfare anyway. Yeah, but keep in mind, as I've said before, the majority of the people that need the assistance are the working poor. Plus, an additional $57 billion will be taken from various domestic programs designed to help the poor. If President Manchild wants to make America great again, why is he slashing the federal budget in areas that would actually help Americans? This is what the money from the increase in the defense budget would do. Number 1, millions of teachers could be hired. 2, millions of jobs could be created in poverty-stricken communities. 3, our our crumbling infrastructure could be rebuilt. 4, scholarships could be funded for students who can't afford college, who are in poverty-stricken areas. 5, our military veterans could actually receive the care they deserve. Our unnecessary military spending will be at the expense of our nation's poor, working poor, and the middle class. Yeah, it costs money to run a country. But first, we must follow the Christian credo. Give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach that man to fish, make him suffer for a lifetime. So beautiful. It brings a tear to my eye, really. You want to hear a really weird irony? Even St. Ronald Reagan knew it took money to run a country. So, here is a brief look back at St. Reagan. When Reagan came into office, he was facing a nasty recession. High unemployment, high inflation. They called it stagflation. So in 1981, Reagan signed into law the largest tax cut in U.S. history. It had a catchy name, too, the Economic Recovery Act of 1981. This bill pushed through a 23% across-the-board cut of all individual tax rates, and it took the highest rate at that time from 70% down to 28%. This ill-conceived monumental tax cut was, of course, directed toward the wealthy, who were supposed to take their newfound money, increase production, hire more people, thereby allowing the money to trickle down into the hands of ordinary working people, who would then pump that money back into the economy through their increased purchasing power, thereby causing increased payroll taxes to come flooding in to the federal government. That never happened. See, it never does. Money from tax cuts never gets reinvested back into a company. More people are never hired. That money goes into the pockets of CEOs, executives, and investors. And because rich people decided to keep the money, far fewer jobs were created than originally projected. Because of this, the federal government lost out on a huge amount of tax money that our government needed to help them run this country, especially at a time when we were so deeply entrenched in the Cold War with the Soviet Union. I mean, that was costing us a lot of money too. So, every year thereafter, as a result of this massive tax cut, the country was facing ever larger budget deficits, which only served to increase our nation's debt. So over the next several years, during his 2 terms, St. Reagan ended up signing into law several bills that actually raised taxes, thus revenue, by eliminating some tax shelters and closing some tax loopholes. According to tax historian Joseph Thorndike, the tax bills of 1982 and 1984 constituted the biggest tax increase ever enacted during peacetime. St. Reagan even bolstered Social Security through an increase in the payroll tax. So you see, even conservative Republican St. Reagan knew it took money to run a country, and that his massive tax cut of 1981 probably wasn't such a good idea after all. But enough of the warm and fuzzy trip down memory lane. President Manchild's idea of making America great again is to unnecessarily expand our military and, of course, unnecessarily increase security at the Mexican border, but cut everything that helps American citizens. By the way, right now, net immigration at the U.S.-Mexico border is 0. Yeah, 0. So, America's working poor. They can fish all they want. Not only will they not catch any fish, they won't even be able to catch a friggin' break. It certainly appears as though reducing federal receipts into the federal government is by design, doesn't it? I mean, ExxonMobil and General Electric can get away with paying absolutely no federal income taxes whatsoever, even after earning millions or billions of dollars in profits a year. But by God, the IRS is going to get their 28% out of me, a retired fireman living on a fixed income. Man, are you serious? But it's not just a lack of corporate taxes that's unbalancing our economy. Businesses have succeeded in busting most unions. Workers no longer have bargaining power. Low wages and low or non-existent corporate taxes means more for the rich and an irreversible diminishing of our middle class. By the way, historically, our economy was the most robust when the middle class was thriving. Taxes were, of course, higher, and unions were a lot stronger. These things and many more have led to a shrinking of our middle class and an explosion in the size of the class of the working poor. People leaving the middle class and entering the class of the working poor need assistance, which means right now more people are needing help from the federal government than ever before. So, what are we doing to help people once again succeed and possibly ascend back into the middle class? Or help poor people actually reach the middle class? Nothing. We the people have stopped demanding that our government help people in need. Hell, there's people in need that insist on voting Republican so that they, what, can keep on being people in need? What the fuck? Give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and feed him for a lifetime. What if he already knows how to fish? But just no matter how hard he tries, The fish just ain't biting. What do you think Jesus would do for that man? Would he make that man continue to suffer? Or would he help him? And whatever happened to our belief in biblical passages like Proverbs 19:17? Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done. Or Proverbs 31:8-9. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. You know, the Christians might be right. Maybe this country was founded on Christian principles. But one thing's for sure, we are not a Christian nation anymore. Well, that's it. I want to thank you for watching my video blog. On my next episode, I'll be talking about government spending and on what our government is not spending. Until then, as you go about your daily lives, let's just try to be better versions of ourselves. Take care.